For this evening, Daniel Bernstein will be, title of his speech is 2,230. The entertaining speaker, number 5, speaking after dinner, so I hope everyone had something good to eat. Daniel will be delivering an entertaining after-dinner talk on a specific theme, delivering the talk using the skills developed in the preceding project. Daniel's speech will get the green light at 8 minutes, yellow light at 9, and 10 o'clock at 10. 10 o'clock or 10 minutes, whichever comes first, the red light. Please put your hands together for Daniel Bernstein.
I really hope I'm not serious about 10 o'clock. I haven't heard that much. I'd like to invite you to join me on a journey. A 2,230-kilometer journey. With a purpose. And this purpose is to attend 3 weddings in 3 different cities in less than 1 week. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, welcome guests. There's a bit of room in the car, so you can just hop on in. You might have to share seatbelts though, there's a lot of you. So, the first wedding occurred on a Tuesday night. Tuesday, middle of the week. I can say I cheated a bit here because this first wedding took place in Toronto. I lived in Toronto. So, I managed to go after a regular day of work, drive into the wedding, enjoy, go home, sleep in my own bed, all was well. 2 nights later was the second wedding. Now, the second wedding was in Detroit. For those of you who are not necessarily as familiar, I know it's a bit hard to see with the colors that Google Maps decides to print, but we've got a nice little triangle here showing the entire trip. And specifically, from Toronto, where I live, to Detroit, where the wedding took place, is about a 4-hour drive. Now, for this stage of the trip, I invited a friend to join along with me, and sat next to me was my navigator. This is before GPS was so common, so I was navigating using old printed out maps, somewhat similar to these, but a little bit more detailed. And of course, partway through the drive, it starts to snow. Now, I'm Canadian. Snow doesn't really bother me so much. Although I do sometimes feel that even among Canadians, I'm one of the few people who actually knows how to drive in the snow. But I had picked my route off of a map. Most people, when going from Toronto to Detroit, drive over this lake to Sarnia, and then down south to Detroit. To me, it made more sense to go south of the lake. Normally, this adds about another half hour to the drive. Considering the snow, I actually ended up getting to my destination about 2 hours earlier than most of the other people who were coming to the same wedding. Anyway, I attended the wedding. It was great. It was fun. Time to move on. It's Thursday night. It's the middle of the winter. I have to get to New Jersey to spend Shabbat for the next wedding, which is on Sunday. So, I start driving. Way across, that's a nice 8+ hour drive there. And I started the drive Thursday night after the wedding. I figured I had enough time to keep driving until about midnight. It was still snowing. For this stage of the trip, I was alone. Now, that means no one to keep me company, no one to keep me awake. I had 1 CD. Thank God I liked that CD. But it was a somewhat boring trip. And by the time I got to the motel where I stayed that night, I think when I got out of the car, I kicked off a block of ice about that thick from my front fender. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself there. The key thing is, it's after the wedding, after a large meal, After a lot of dancing, I'm tired, gotta keep awake. What do you do to keep awake on a long drive? Oh no, I'm not saying coffee. I don't drink coffee. I have never drank coffee in my life. I cannot stand the taste. Exactly. Mountain Dew. Mountain Dew has about double the caffeine of Coke in the United States. It's about equivalent to a cup of coffee, but they tend to be larger bottles, cans, whatever you end up using. Now, I mentioned I don't drink coffee, I don't drink cola, I didn't like any of these sorts of caffeinated drinks. And I did like Mountain Dew, but I come from Canada, where Mountain Dew has no caffeine. So, I'm drinking this bottle of Mountain Dew, it's late at night, driving along. Finally, sometime around midnight, I get to a point where I figure, okay, I really shouldn't be going much further. Look for a motel. I actually took 2 tries because the first motel I found was full. Second motel I got to, yeah, we've got 1 room left, fine, great. Stop overnight, get in the room, get in bed. Spent the next 7 hours staring at the ceiling. Well, morning came along, feeling a bit funny in my stomach from the effect of the caffeine and the lack of sleep, but I've got to go on. I can't just stop in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. Fine, get in the car, don't want to fall asleep, what do? Yeah, I was stupid. Another bottle of Mountain Dew. Yes, it kept me awake for the rest of the drive. Kept on driving. Early in the afternoon, I arrived at a friend's house in Elizabeth, New Jersey, that was it. And I joined him for Shabbat. Really nice guy. It was still a young family, he didn't have that much room in his apartment, but he had a neighbor who I happened to know, so he arranged for me to sleep there. Sleep, as I say. And that night, Shabbat, I spent staring at the ceiling. I alternated a little bit. I stared at the wall some also, and I listened to the wonderful rhythm of the water dripping from the tap in the bathroom. It was very entertaining. Now, most people try to sleep on Shabbat afternoon. For myself, until pretty recently, that wasn't practical. I just could not sleep while the sun was up. So I spent another day awake. I've been awake for about 2 days straight now. Thankfully it's Shabbat. I'm not driving anywhere by this point. Let's say Shabbat came around. I got to bed, and I actually managed to fall asleep for 2 hours. Caffeine is powerful when you're not used to it. The next morning, driving to Englewood, New Jersey, pretty short drive, and attend the wedding. Good friend, had a great time at the wedding. Met up with some other friends who had come in for just that wedding, and thankfully convinced one of them to join me for the drive home. This friend came and I asked him to do most of the driving that night. I figure I'd had enough of being stupid. And we drove part of the way back that evening, coming way up about there, and stopped in a motel for the night, where, thankfully, I actually managed to sleep. And come morning, I felt comfortable enough once more to take the wheel myself, continue driving all the way back around to Toronto, completing 2,230 kilometers of driving. This trip, aside from being a wonderful experience, getting to attend the weddings of my friends, taught me a number of things. First off, I learned how valuable it is to be able to rely on friends to help out. Secondly, I learned just how amazing it is, what you can accomplish when you push yourself, when you have to. Finally, I learned not to underestimate the power of caffeine. I'm a Toastmaster.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Okay, would everybody take the other sheet of paper, other half of paper? Please spend a few minutes evaluating Daniel.